All right. So, Xavier and Joe, you guys are free to unmute. Can you hear me?
Muted.
Yeah,
Yep,
can hear you.
we can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Okay. Just to make sure, since there's not a lot of people on the stream yet, if everyone on stream can hear me, if I can get like a comment. Joe, do you know if we're showing up on YouTube and Xavier, Facebook?
Let me see. Facebook, it looks like we're good.
Okay. Looks like the game
Huh?
is up. So,
Yeah,
you know,
audio's playing through on YouTube.
perfect. All right.
Let me check the audio real quick. Yep, we are definitely working on Facebook.
Perfect, thank you. Guys, make sure to mute yourselves, otherwise you'll echo. Um, Hello, everyone who has showed up to the stream. Welcome to the first episode of my game analysis podcast. I'm going by the moniker QK Halliday because that's just what I use as a gamer tag online. And I thought it would be kind of fun to throw it in here because we are playing and analyzing video games on this stream. So this is a live podcast, and we are going to be analyzing games weekly. And the first week for this game, we decided to analyze a game called Ghostrunner. Now, this game was developed by One More Level Studios, and it was developed in Unreal Engine 4.26, which is an engine level above the one that we work on as VR developers. So my name is Quinn Kuslich. I am a VR developer and technical artist. I'm joined by two very special guests, Joseph Jannsen and Xavier Rodriguez. And Joe is a VR developer and a technical artist like myself, and Xavier is also a VR developer and technical artist. So I'm going to transfer the torch over to Joe real quick, and I'm going to ask him to kind of explain what the game itself, Ghostrunner, is about, because he has played it all the way to completion. So Joe, if you could quickly just run us through what this game is and kind of the general gist of things before we get to Xavier and let him introduce himself. But if you could just kind of give us a rundown of what is this game and what is it
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, of course. So again, my name's Joseph Jannsen, like what Quinn said. So just to kind of give a brief rundown of what Ghostrunner is. It takes place in a cyberpunk-themed post-apocalyptic setting where it tells a story of a cybernetically enhanced swordsman who awakens after getting thrown out of a tower with little memory of what happened to him, who he is, or why he feels so compelled to immediately start slicing and dicing all that are in his path. But he's guided by a disembodied voice of an old man, otherwise known as the Architect, and the Ghost Runner ends up getting wrapped up on an ongoing power struggle between the supposed rulers of this broken world he lives in and the efforts of a dying resistance, as well as trying to figure out the mystery behind who he actually is and where he originated from. Other than that, it's a very action-based game that's oriented on high-intensity action and combat.
All right, Xavier, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us how much you know about Ghostrunner.
Yeah, hello. Well, my name is Xavier Rodriguez. I am a junior VR developer at Ringling College of Art and Design. And in terms of my experience with Ghostrunner, I'd say I probably have maybe between 15 to 20 minutes of knowledge of playing the game personally before I put it down. So, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing more of the game for the first time.
All right, perfect. So, to kind of preface this, we're going to select two levels that we think best represent the art and game design and overall mechanics of this game to showcase them to you. And one is at an earlier stage of the game, and then another one will be at a later stage of the game. And both environments, I believe, are, different enough where it'll make an interesting stream. And we're going to try and analyze both effectively, as well as the game design within both, to really accurately portray this game in a 1-hour live stream. So, the first level we're going to play is actually one of my favorites. It's called Jacked Up. And one thing you'll notice is that Joe has also played through this level, and you can see that he died 55 times. So it's definitely a challenging game, and that's something that I really want to cover as we're playing this game and we're analyzing it. And I have Xavier and Joe here to make sure the conversation keeps going in case I get distracted by the gameplay. So thank you guys again for being here. I'm really excited, and I just kind of want to get started. Fair warning, before we really load in and we start playing, my computer is a laptop. So if there's any stuttering on stream, I really apologize. It said it's rated for streaming, but I'm not totally sure on that. We've only tested this a few times, and I do notice that when I load into a level, it kind of lags a little bit. But Xavier and Joe, you guys kind of seeing what you're supposed to see, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's looking it's a little bit jittery, but it's looking pretty
Yeah, I
solid.
mean, my computer takes a second to catch up as well. It just is like that.
Yeah. Now let me ask, does Ghostrunner have any frame rate issues? Just be
So That is a really great question. Yes, it does. So I've noticed specific times, and that could just be due to my hardware, but I do notice it stuttering at certain times, and it's especially in load in and load outs of levels. So when it's either loading in the new level or it's loading us out of the level, I'll notice some stuttering, and sometimes the game just straight up freezes, and it will crash on me. But that problem's eliminated when I play with a controller versus when I play with a keyboard, and I've noticed that with other games as well. But other issues with the game when it drops frames is specifically in combat situations. So I've noticed it happen at certain times where I'm fighting a boss and I need to analyze their animation frames in order to effectively eliminate them, and they'll just lag out, right? And that's super frustrating in a game that's, you know, takes high reaction times, and, you know, it's a very skill heavy game, and it's definitely something a large complaint I have with the game. But it makes up for it by having a really easy reload system. So the moment you die, you're able to reload back in. There's no loading screen you have to wait for. And this is a bug. Oh, shit.
Oh,
you got him.
well,
Yeah, so I was trying to use an ability there that basically causes the enemies to shoot at each other. And that's a late game. It's a late game power-up that you get right near the end of the game, but I've noticed that since I've gotten there and now I'm playing an earlier level, I get to bring those abilities back with me, which is really cool. I didn't know that.
yeah. Would you mind just kind of explaining some of the mechanics of the game?
Joe, I'm going to leave that to you.
Oh.
Yeah. So in terms of some of the mechanics of the game, obviously, as you can see on screen here, it's the typical, you know, parkour mechanics: wall running, sliding, jumping, and gliding through the air to try and avoid all environmental hazards as well as projectiles from enemies. There's also unique capabilities that the Ghostrunner has, such as the Tempest, which is like a wind blast, as well as a focus that allows Quinn to like specifically target specific enemies and obviously eliminate them.
As he's talking about this, you can see that in the lower left corner of the UI. This is an overscreen lay, like a screen overlay UI. So this is something you see commonly in games that are first-person shooters or even third-person shooters. It's a 2D UI placed on the screen directly in front of the camera. So wherever the player looks, that UI floats on top of the gameplay. And this is something that differs from our experience in VR development, where we usually make UI either 3D, and we almost never attach it to the main camera because it causes really bad performance issues. But this is something that you can totally get away with in, you know, traditional games, I want to call them, where you're where you're not worried about spatial, like 360 visuals, you know. And you can see the abilities directly. I just lagged there. You can see the abilities directly in the lower left corner. So when Joe was talking about Tempest, we have Tempest there, and then he was talking about the focus ability. And sorry for interrupting you, Joe. I will let you finish about the other two abilities.
Oh, you're good. No worries. But the other two, there's like a hacking capability where you can select an enemy and choose, and essentially, as they describe it in the game, hack their neural cortex and cause them to start fighting the other enemies for you. So it can be a beneficial thing to utilize in case you're dealing with a really nasty enemy that's just been annoying you.
And that's what I just attempted to use in that last section, and it didn't work because I feel like the enemy that I wanted the bullet enemy to shoot was out of range. So he just decided to clear his mind and shoot me instead. And then the last ability is the surge, right? The sword swipe.
Yeah, the sword swipe, which allows you to shoot out a projectile from your sword, and then that will cut an array of enemies down based on if they're within the radius of that blast.
Oh, Jesus. Alright, let's try that again. Oh, I got
But
it,
I guess going into a few talking points we kind of wrote up prior to this event, we kind of had some notes about the game. I guess one that I wanted to really start with right off the bat was just the comparisons to the. I called it the comparison to Contra, but it's just the overall sense of like high difficulty with this game, because anything can kill you and it only takes one hit, so you have to be extremely aware of all your environmental hazards and surroundings.
And I think, just to jump on that, Joe, I think that brings up a really big flaw with the overall game design, is normally when you want being aware of your surroundings, you wouldn't use a first-person camera, especially for melee games. So this is extremely unconventional in its practices. Because normally when you play a melee game, which is heavily focused on melee combat, and also you have a low damage system, so if you get hit once, you pretty much die. You come to a point where you have to go, well, normally we do this in third person because that way we give the player a constant view of their surroundings, whereas this place you're limited by the 180 viewport of the character's vision.
Let me ask, does that ever actually like interfere with your ability to play the game? Like,
all
have you
the
ever
time.
been bullet multiple
All
times?
the time. I get shot in the back pretty much every time I die, unless I do something that's stupid or against the overall game design. I am killed by someone coming behind me and shooting me in the back and being unable to deflect or even turn around in time before they can shoot me.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it.
Yeah.
And that can be very subjective too, but then, again, like I understand, I share your frustration there, as I've died multiple times in this game already. But I think it adds obviously to the sense of challenge. But the one thing I've really particularly enjoyed about this game, and this could be different with your opinion, but I really enjoyed the movement system and how they set it up, because it's very Doom inspired, where it's deliberate and fluid with how you need to get from point A to point B in the most effective way possible. And this will be shared across the parkour sections of the experience. The puzzle sequences are a bit weaker, and we can get into that later, but as well as the combat sequences.
Yeah, I'm actually not planning on covering any of the... As far as I can tell, the levels we have selected do not have a puzzle section, and that's just due to the fact that I feel like it doesn't showcase the game in its entirety, because most of the sections have us inside of this industrial cyberpunk environment reminiscent of Blade Runner, like the film. And a lot less of it takes place in the Cyber Void. But one thing that is cool about the Cyber Void is it's got these crazy displacement map materials, and it feels like as you're walking through this environment, the walls are just straight jittering. I'm unsure if that happens in this level, but if it does, we'll make sure to point that out and get a close-up on those. Xavier, is there anything that you're noticing specifically about this art style that you'd like to discuss, since you're usually the guy who does the modeling for our projects?
Everything they produce.
Let's see. I'm trying to look right now. I've noticed it has a very how to describe it? It feels very like factory-like. Like, it's not. Usually when you do sci-fi, there's kind of like two ways you can approach it. You can kind of do like the super clean, sleek neon kind of look that you'll see kind of something like maybe Tron capture. But here I'm definitely getting more of kind of like a factory feel, and by that I just mean like you see in the texture work, it's a little bit more scratchy, it's a little bit more dirty. This place, it feels very worn.
I feel like that's actually pretty much covers the two ways that you would go with sci-fi. Is you go for either this like very pristine environment, no dust whatsoever, really no imperfection, and then you can go to this more factory-like industrial setting. And I would say that Ghostrunner leans heavily into that industrial setting. Everything is mechanical and everything is built by machines, and you can really tell by looking at the environments. Like just this room, we're running through these moving platforms, right? But you can tell that this is probably part of a factory of some sort, and everything's very dirty. But there's clearly paths that workers who work and automate in this facility, or that make a living in this facility, they have a presence here with all of the stuff we see laying around that could only be left by a human, and that's something really cool that they included. And this is common in every single game you could possibly play.
Yeah.
Imperfections are extremely important.
Yeah,
All the
there's
details.
obviously there's the little bit of like the little bits of the setting that are like clearly made for specifically the character in mind. Like the wall runnings, where it's like I don't know if that would be naturally in the factory so much as they wanted to do like a little visual indicator for the player so they knew where they could one-up rolls.
Yeah, that's just more of like the user affordances and the design philosophy of that, and how to guide a player through a specific level.
And given that this is an action game, I totally I think it was a great decision to include things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a very clear player path of where to go, and that isn't just because I've already played this level in the past. It's because you can really tell based off of kind of how the platforms are moving and the general fluidity of where they intend for me to go in this level is clear. I mean, I can. They also have these hilarious just signs with arrows on them. And I like to call these Ghostrunner directions, because they push you directly up and tell you exactly where to go, and this is a very very in-your-face aspect of level design where you basically just spray paint an arrow telling the user where to go.
Yeah.
Not
In fact,
the
if
most
we go back to
immersive
that,
way to do it.
if we could go back to that actually.
Well, I died,
something
so
I know.
that's perfect.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, so one thing I've noticed about the arrow, at least in this is like a particular instance. I don't know if that's the case with all the arrows, but I feel like it's honestly pretty unnecessary because you see the arrow and it says go to the left, but there's I guess you died there. But I don't see the direction that the player could really go in that would kind of confuse them on the path forward in the level. So I'm a bit perplexed by the decision to include it there.
I feel like this is probably because when they had some playtest, users either tried to jump over here, which would be weird because there's really nothing over here, or they attempted to try and find a way back and ended up back where they had started. So this kind of shows that we're using verticality of the level to show progression. Because we're going up, we're working our way up, and then we leave the area.
Ties into the whole theme of climbing up the Dharma Tower.
Yeah, I mean,
within this universe.
There are pretty much no scenes besides one particular boss fight where you fall, where you go down. You're pretty much always working your way up. Oh, that was close. I'm amazed that happened. Sometimes the game systems surprise me, and one way that they do surprise me is often with these enemies that fire with, instead of just one shot, they have a rapid succession of projectiles for you to dodge, and there's really no way to use the special air dodge around them. You instead have to wait for them to have to reload, and they use audio and visual cues to show you that using animation and then a voice line where they basically say, I'm out, keep him busy, and that kind of shows us exactly when to attack. And I like how they do that for most enemies. Even the late game enemies have specific animation frames for the player to analyze when they're about to execute their attack. So, that's just something I can appreciate as a developer, especially as someone like myself. I'm very interested in animation. I do rigging for fun quite often and explore a lot of animated movies to kind of see like how could we put something from a Pixar film into a game about killing people. It's interesting, how do we put specific animations like that in?
Yeah, no, I mean it like especially in this kind of game, because like I said earlier, it's an action game. So kind of like and one of the things that or the sign of like a good action game is when all the enemies, even the late game enemies, they should always have a tell, which is basically like some kind of animation or visual that lets the player know like this is my moment to attack, or this is the moment I need to block, or whatever action they need to do. There's an animation or some visual indication of what needs to be done. Because otherwise, because when you're playing an action game, the last thing you want to do is just kind of be hit by a random attack that you literally couldn't see coming. That's not fair. It's like how you were saying earlier that like you don't like the first person perspective in some ways because it makes it hard to see when enemies are attacking you at certain points. And so you want to make sure that when you can see the enemies, that they're giving you signs that like now's not the time to attack me. Now is the time to attack me. That way the player can kind of learn and better understand the mechanics of the game.
Am I doing this wrong, Jannsen? I guess not.
It looks like you're going in the right direction. But speaking of which, something you brought up a bit earlier, Quinn, was talking about the challenge of the game, and I wanted to kind of hear your opinion on it first before I kind of dive into mine, just because I know we have a difference.
From an onboarding perspective, I don't like the challenge. This is not friendly to people who are unfamiliar with video games, and I think that every game should have a way for someone who has never picked up a controller in their life to play it and have fun. And this game is definitely not one of those. It's the same issue that I have with Dark Souls. Now, I personally am very bad at games, though. Like, I tend to really dislike games that are overly challenging, and like there's a lot of games that are made specifically so they can be challenging, to the user, right? So that's something that I personally find frustrating with a lot of games I try to play, is that if it is too hard, if I cannot win, or if it really makes it hard for me to win, I tend to not like them as much because I often play games to either relax or study for specific VR development purposes. And games that are hard to the point of crushing your soul with difficulty are not something that I would study as a VR developer when making an experience, because that's not the kind of experience I want to make. So that's my personal ethos on the game design of this game. It's great if you want a challenge. It's great if you're familiar with video games, if you're familiar with action platformers. It is not great if you're my mom or my girlfriend and you're attempting to play this experience for the first time. You're gonna be punished, and it's almost like punishing you for attempting to play a game.
It's funny, Quinn, because I think we actually have, at least in terms of at least in terms of playing games, I think we, funnily enough, have very different ethos on kind of what we look for in a game. Because I think I kind of fall on the other side of the spectrum, where I can really appreciate a game that is willing to tell the players, "You're not going to be able to beat me." And you're not like, and if you're not learning the mechanics, you're not gonna have a fun time.
And
you need
that is precisely why you were on this live stream today.
Yeah,
you love games
Ghostrunner.
like that.
Yeah, because I personally, I think Ghostrunner, it looks really cool. I really like the neon sci-fi look of it.
Oh,
you know,
as you can see, we have sorry to interrupt. We have changed environments. This is the second level that we wanted to cover with this playthrough, and you can see the visual difference between the earlier game sections and this section. Xavier, please continue. I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I was just gonna say, I think this looks really cool, and I think the gameplay itself looks like a lot of fun. And the only thing, like, it wasn't the challenge to me that kind of stopped me from wanting to play it, because honestly, it could just be that I didn't get far enough. But I personally didn't find it too challenging. But the real hurdle for me, and the reason I could never really get into this game in general, even though I'm a huge fan of action games, even though I'm a huge fan of challenging games, was the control scheme, or at least like you can customize controls in this game, so you can, it's technically the argument of, is it okay to critique controls if you can change them or not? But in this case, I'm going to call it a flaw because it's the control scheme that I got when I was handed the controller. So that kind of feels to me like that's the game designer saying, this is how you're supposed to play the game.
So to preface what Xavier is talking about, and this is something that has been a point of argument for me, Joe, and Xavier, and that is the jump button is the RB on the Xbox gamepad, which is what you would plug into Steam to play this game. And Joe and Xavier don't like that, and I personally do. And my reason for that is because if I press the A button to jump instead of the RB button, I cannot aim and jump at the same time. I have to pull my finger off of the stick that I'm using to aim to jump, and I feel like that would disrupt the flow of gameplay. Joe, however, proved that wrong because he's actually beat the game using that control method. But Joe and Xavier, I want you to talk about why the kind of game design that I like is stupid, and why you like using the A button better.
So here's my
issue. Stupid.
It's not a doubt. Here's the thing. Decision, in retrospect at least, I forgive the decision because you can customize your control scheme. So if you don't like the jump button of being RB, you can literally just change it. And in that sense, I actually give props to the game for allowing users to customize their controls. I think that, like, I really appreciate when a game doesn't lock its controls down to just like one scheme and allows you kind of customize the experience. I think that's good for the user generally. But here's the thing about it being RB naturally. When you grow up playing Mario, you grow up playing your Sonics, or whatever other game you grow up with that involves jumping, and usually the jump button, it's A, maybe it's B. If you're playing on a Sony console, it's either X or circle. Like, it's always a face button. It's like, it is almost always a face button. And like, I feel like that's the way it's kind of been instilled into a lot of people that play games, is face button is usually always the jump button. And that's kind of what I grew up with. That's what I'm used to. And I think that's what a lot of people are also used to. So when a game comes around and it changes the jump button to this kind of like bizarre right bumper, right bumper, that's a weird one, because I've had right bumper mean so many different things. It's been a lock on, it's been a parry, it's been an attack. It's been a lot of very, very drastically different things mechanically speaking, but it's never been the jump button. And so it's, I tried playing the game, just at a random level, and I could not get used to the right bumper being the jump button, and it made me not want to play the game because it was kind of frustrating trying to get used to that, and it's very unfortunate because it looks like a really fun game, and seeing that I can actually customize the controls, it's definitely something I'd be interested in playing. But at the time, got in the way of my enjoyment.
If I were to add to that, I'll play devil's advocate here.
Let's play devil's advocate, but then we should probably move on to something other than the RB being the default.
Yeah, the right bumper.
So get your point in, Joe. But let's not spend too much time talking about the controller mappings of this game when there's.
If I were to be a devil's advocate and supporting Quinn's statement about the right bumper being a more natural jump on, it's like you could argue that by saying like games, more sophisticated parkour games such as Mirror's Edge or Dying Light that utilize that specific button mapping, it would make sense. So it just depends on where your gaming comfort has come from and like what's your familiarity with like these type of action oriented gameplay.
And that is why it's so important when you're designing games to design your games to have customizable controls so users could change whatever controls they need. And Halo does a really great job of it by offering different controller schemes used by, I believe it was pros in competitions that kind of set up those controller schemes, if I remember not, like when you talk about the Universal Reclaimer default and Scout default, you know what I'm talking about, Joe?
Yeah.
Were those designed just by testers, or were those designed by people who were playing Halo back in the day?
I mean, Bungie went back. This goes back to the first Halo, actually. Interesting enough, they had like Southpaw, Recon, all those different mappings already in the first game by the get-go because they've had so many playtests when that was that played a lot more of a pivotal role in those early games. So they actually had all their playtesters like recommend like different mappings because they're like, oh, I like this system, or like I'm more comfortable with this. And then there were some that were just so absurd that like Bungie just kind of added them in there because they're like, let's just see like how players react to this if they decide to choose it.
No, which is really cool. And I'm glad that pretty much controller customization is pretty much common in almost every single game that comes out nowadays. And with the original Mario, it definitely was not.
Mario This Ain't would be my 3-word review of Ghostrunner.
My 3-word review of Ghostrunner would be kill, die, repeat. Because that is what the standard gameplay loop is. You kill, you die, you repeat. And that is exactly what the entire game will be. Jesus.
I might have to revise my 3-word review. I think I would change it from Mario the Saint to Guy Sword Slash. Because really what throughout most of this game is you are a guy and you've got a sword that you slash with. So I feel like it's very representative of the game, kind of overall.
Got it. I hate that enemy.
Speaking of enemies, do we want to talk about what type of variety of enemies you'll be fighting in this game?
Yeah, why don't we go into that?
I would love to hear about the enemy type.
So Joe, I'm gonna let you summarize that because getting into the minutia of the enemies and abilities while I'm playing this game is going to be impossible, and you'll be hearing me go a lot, and I just don't want to do that on stream.
Yeah, no, understandable. So I guess in terms of enemies, it gives you your typical ones, such as the single shot user and projectile based ones, and then they'll switch it up with automatic weapons, so you have to like really worry about timing and watching more about like the additional projectiles coming in your path. The game kind of at a progressive rate will introduce you to one new enemy type roughly every level or so. So you'll be introduced to other things such as the mech robots, as you could see, like Quinn was jumping on to do like parkour and traverse across a portion of a gap. But you'll also fight other individuals such as like samurais that you can only kill by first countering their initial attack, and then once they're in a stun animation, if you do a successful counter, then you can proceed to actually eliminate them.
And they're annoying enemies by default. What's really annoying is that you essentially, for the I want to say mid-game boss, second boss fight of the game. The boss fights are very loose in definition because when you fight just like a map enemy essentially, but the second boss fight in the game you fight essentially a Ghostrunner, like yourself, the character that is the Ghostrunner, and it is basically one of those samurais. except you have to hit them 4 times, and they can also launch these projectiles at you while you're trying to fight them. And the game at that point feels very it does not feel good to fight that boss, and that is where the animation frame lag that I was talking about earlier comes in. Continue, Joe.
Can you
I'm
not-
so sorry.
Or what were you gonna ask, Xavier?
I was gonna ask, can you parry the boss's projectiles? Because I know that you can parry enemy projectiles, like common enemies, but I don't know.
There's certain
Not
ones
the
that you
projectile,
can.
not the projectiles of that boss and the enemies that come after it, which have the same abilities that she does.
Yeah.
Okay, I would say, in my opinion, I would actually outright say that I would question that design choice, because I feel like if they're going to include a skill-based parry mechanic into the game, and they're gonna have an enemy that shoots projectiles that up to that point you've been able to parry, then I feel like you should be able to parry the boss's projectile. You know, that just feels like it'd be kind of like an obvious choice for how you would beat the boss. But I'm a little bit shocked to hear that you cannot parry their weapon, because usually that's kind of the action game thing. You know, you parry the boss's attack and then you hit the boss for some damage. You know, rinse and repeat, and that's a whole lot of fun from my personal experience.
Yeah. It's a very there's like questionable elements of the game philosophy in Ghostrunner, but there's also ones that are very deliberate, and I think that's what I think the developers struggle with a lot, and I feel like if they were to make another game like this, that they would definitely take that into consideration, and making a bit more opportunity-based interactions set up, because like a lot of the times with the gameplay design in this game, you get into this very addictive gameplay loop where you're going from one arena room to the next, and
this game is really good at establishing a flow.
Yeah,
but
when
you lose
there's
that
times
flow, like right now, I do not have a flow. I am getting absolutely destroyed by these enemies, and it's because I have not really figured out this section to the best of my abilities. Oh my god. That was so frustrating. I'm sorry, Joe. Go on.
You're alright. But yeah, like what Quinn was saying, there's times where you're just gonna die over and over, and it will ruin the flow. Fortunately, the thing that's great about it is that while it feels punishing, you may die 100 times, but that instantaneous respawn and overall fairly generous checkpoints ensure that like Ghostrunner's challenging combat never really becomes a chore, unless you're the type of person that's just totally uninterested in this type of gameplay genre, which is fine.
There will be people that are totally uninterested in this game, and that's totally fine, but I think that apart from gameplay, one thing to establish about this game is that it is definitely an interesting title, and the studio is trying to do something different with it, and that is why we're playing it on the stream, is because it's definitely a unique title, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is a very unique title. I gotta say, I think what they set out for, I don't know if they've, I don't know what the developers' goals were when creating this game, but I feel like at the very least they accomplished something worth discussing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely a speedrunner's dream, as they like say it on their like title,
that's how
on their value proposition.
Marketed it as well, as what it was supposed to be, a speedrunner's dream, and
yeah, I would agree with that statement. This definitely looks like something speedrunners would get a lot of fun out of.
Yeah, like if you're the type of person who enjoyed like doing speed levels or speed runs for games like Resident Evil, which comes to mind like for me immediately, like this game would be definitely right up your alley, or someone who just wants to be able to master a very difficult combat system and like portray that to the viewers.
Oh, Joe, your favorite enemies are back.
Oh, here they come.
Yeah.
Let's see how well we can get across this now that you're familiar with the level.
It's probably still gonna take a bit. We have 30 minutes left on the stream still, but I'd like to stop, when we have about 15 minutes left to essentially sorry about that. I would like to stop when we have about 15 minutes left so we can talk about what we plan to stream for next week, as well as thank everyone who came to watch, because we actually have a decent amount of people watching the stream. Actually, about as much as I thought were going to be here, so it's really nice.
Wait, how many people are... Wait, let me just check.
I think
how
it's
many
like
people are here?
I think it's like 5.
Five people? Wow, that's a pretty good... I'd say that's a pretty good audience.
For three lonely college students, not bad.
Lonely?
Not bad. Hey.
Well, just Well, lonely within our work.
Busy.
We are very isolated in our work. You know.
It's nice to analyze a game in this format. It's definitely more fun than, how we've been doing it in the past, which is playing it alone. I'd say that playing a video game can often be quite isolating, and doing it in this format makes it, have not only like a research purpose to it, but it also just makes it feel very worthwhile. Not to mention it gives us practice.
It gives it just gives you a new perspective. Hearing it from like so many different people's viewpoints.
Yeah, especially because we disagree on a lot of the aspects of this game. Like Joe thinks it's great, and I honestly, really, right now at this exact moment in time, I hate this game. And that is so weird that this game makes me so upset, but I keep coming back to play it, and that just shows how good the game design is. It's addicting. That's so poorly designed. I hate them.
That is the point of the game. It's a game that you get frustrated. Like the game designers want you to be frustrated because they want that anger to turn into like in beating the game.
Fuel by rage.
Yeah, they don't want you playing the game being like, oh, this is so easy, whatever, it's cool, I guess. No. They want you to go, I'm gonna beat this game. I'm gonna destroy this game. And when I'm done with this game, there's gonna be nothing left.
Alright, now that we're at Sorry about that, Xavier. Now that we're at this specific stage, I want to give Joe a chance to talk about the upgrade system.
Ooh, all right. Okay, let me get my notes ready for that.
Okay. Let's cover this.
Hold on, let me find my notes.
Wait a minute, what is this?
Let's see. Hold on, I'm like searching through. Okay. So, with Ghostrunner, there's also an interesting, albeit, slightly gimmicky upgrade system that allows you to really alter and enhance your abilities, and you can earn upgrades automatically as you progress through the game. You'll just unlock these as you continue to go through levels. But what's kind of cool is that you set them up like a circuit board system. So you'll select your different varying pieces of size and shape, and they'll each have different stats, strengths, and weaknesses that'll help benefit, like either reducing your cooldown and your ultimate abilities, or giving you an additional like blink boost. So it really allows a wide variety of customization in terms of like what type of play style you want. Do you want to be like really fast and aggressive, or have a bit more of a passive role that allows you to use your ultimate abilities more commonly? And that's what I kind of like about it. For me, I personally enjoy the already like fast gameplay. So I put a lot of emphasis in my upgrades to be better at combat and give me additional like agility, like with a second boost, as well as emphasis on like the targeting.
One more thing to add to that: the amount of space you're utilizing on your character's circuit board is exactly how fast this charge boost in the lower left corner of the screen will replenish, right? So the more nodes that you program your character with, the slower this bar will refill, right? And that's really cool, because you're basically choosing, do I want to use my immediate kill abilities more often, or do I want to invest more into certain skills and techniques that I use a lot? And what this results in is you constantly changing your player to adapt to a certain situation, which is, kind of how this AI character should work. I mean, he is a AI ninja, like a robotic ninja, and his goal is to constantly adapt to these situations. So programming your character to directly adapt to these situations is great. And Joe, did you have anything else to say on this? Sorry if I interrupted you.
No, you're good. That was pretty much all I wanted to sum up.
Well, since you've covered that, and you've covered the strengths and weaknesses of this system, why don't you show me exactly how you would program your character for this level that I'm on currently?
Okay, let me see. So ideally, let me go. All right, hold on, it's just going full screen here. I usually like to make sure I do like a double boost mechanic, so then that way I can use my blink twice, and ever in the case that I need to utilize it when jumping across like a huge gap in a parkour section or getting away from a projectile. You will put like one of the map upgrades in there, so that way it's easier for me to find some of the unique collectibles in the game, which Quinn, if you wanted to talk about that later, that'd be an interesting topic to bring up.
Yeah, I actually thought we would cover that directly after we cover this screen, because this is like a integral part of the UI for the entire game, and I actually think
Quinn, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
My Tetris side, it's going to. Okay, can you rotate that twice, right? Okay, now go down, over to the left. No, a little bit more. No, over to the left, up. over to the right. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I guess Xavier would really like this system because he's an enormous Tetris fan. But this UI, this menu system is awesome because it essentially gives you these tabs, and each tab is for its own thing, specifically regarding the character. And this is also where you would find your codexes and collectibles, and those are the collectibles that Joe was talking about in the level. So the thing that I just installed onto my character's circuit board essentially will show me on my mini map where collectibles are using a little orange dot. And earlier in the stream, I actually went and grabbed one of those because I had just seen it and I had not obtained that collectible yet. So that makes it really easy to find these in-game elements, whereas otherwise you would have to look up guides. And I really like that they put that in, because a lot of times when I play a game, I'm a completionist about it, and I like to get every stupid collectible in the level. And a lot of times they aren't hidden well, or they're hidden too well, and it disrupts the flow of gameplay to find them. But this menu map icon that shows up when I install this specific upgrade to my character makes it a lot more fun to find the collectibles, and it also, it still adds in that puzzle element of going, well, I see it on the map here, but I'm unsure of where to find it. And, a lot of times it's hidden via level design elements such as verticality, or there's a light that's alluding to something being there, or there's specific wires that are stretching up directly to where it is supposed to be. So, you using this upgrade system to constantly change your character results in a lot of really awesome gameplay events that are triggered directly by you changing your skills on this upgrade board. And so, Joe, I'm just going to add in two other things that I really enjoy, which is the deflector boost, because I am not fast. And I also want to add in there's a specific one I love. Oh, the time boost. Yes, because I'm also slow. And, since a lot of the times you could really double down on a very specific part of this skill tree, or you could have a really good balance of all of the skills in the game, and have a very well balanced character. And a lot of times that's not the goal you'd go for. Instead, you would want to figure out the enemies in a certain room and then program your character so he can deal with those enemies. And a lot of rooms really do a good job of setting that up, and others don't at all. Some of them are just completely different, full of different types of enemies meant to challenge you, and it can often disrupt the flow of gameplay because you're constantly going back in and you're changing these nodes around. And that's just what I personally do, because if it's part of the game, it should be used. And I'm going to use it as intended, and if that use causes a disruption in the flow of gameplay, I'm going to fault the game designers for that. And that's just how it is. That's just how I treat video games when I play them now. I guess I'm a little picky. Enough Ringling critiques makes you kind of a cynic, and it makes you not excuse as much when it comes to games having faults. One of my favorite abilities, though, is this tactical overlay, which I will add now. And then I just want to cover the swords. So one thing that's really cool about this game, I'm a big cosmetics person. I love having a bunch of different swords. And what's cool about this is it didn't make me purchase these swords. The only sword it did make me purchase was this ice sword, which is really funny because I never use it when I'm playing. I paid $1 for this, and I never use it. But these swords that you collect in-game are really awesome, and you can set them up and use them whenever you want. And one of my personal favorites is this golden one, which we'll use right now. And there's also gloves. And I believe, from what Joe was telling me earlier, these gloves come out in a DLC pack, which I don't really like. These should be unlocked, and they should be unlocked by boss fights. Like you're pulling a piece of machinery off the boss you just defeated and then strapping it onto yourself. That's how it should be. So I don't like that they're planning on releasing those in DLC. And then there's just the boring collectibles that have a short description, and then you can inspect it. It's
just give you a little bit of lore.
It just gives you a little bit of lore. It's optional lore in the game that
Yeah.
you can use, but it's really not necessary, and I haven't actually looked at these because I'm just not interested.
I always appreciate that when games do that. Like Spider-Man for PlayStation 4 has
Oh
something
god,
great.
that has some of the best
Okay.
when you're going for those collectibles, the game is so fun to navigate that it doesn't feel like you're just completing a scavenger hunt. Whereas I'm going to say that some of the collectibles in this game feel a little bit scavenger hunty. Is that a word?
Yeah. Well, I think it's just because these level designs, they're so open. They're
meant-
very.
They're meant
very
to be rushed through. You're not supposed to stop and look around as much.
Yeah, because in Spider-Man, they particularly they made it very it wasn't finding them that was the fun of it. It was just controlling Spider-Man that was the fun of it, and just getting to basically web swing across the city, and then as a reward, small little kind of tokens
Yeah,
that would tell you a little bit about the characters and world.
It's funny when you brought up like controlling Spider-Man, I thought immediately of IGN's review where they said it makes you feel like Spider-Man probably a million times in a 5-minute review. Playing Ghostrunner
really
makes you feel like yes.
Really makes you feel like Ghostrunner.
It does not make this game does not make me feel like a cyber ninja with killer instinct. It makes me feel like, I'm embracing the fluidity of the level design in order to effectively clear a room. And it's kind of a puzzle platformer / action game in that way, because I'm spending a lot of time, jumping in and analyzing a situation. And a lot of times I cannot fully analyze my player path before I die, and being able to respond immediately and then go back in and continue that analysis process so I can figure out how to accurately clear a level is really helpful. So they took the challenge of their gameplay and then they designed around it by having this respawn system. And though I still find faults with their game design and how challenging the gameplay can be, I do appreciate that they didn't make me go through a loading screen every time I died, because I would have stopped playing this game within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, what? Okay, so I think the big thing, 'cause, gentlemen, we're all VR developers here, so I think the big thing we should talk about is, do we think we could make this work in VR?
I am really glad you brought that up, because we have 15 minutes left, and that is the perfect time to transition to this. Joe, Xavier, why don't you start since you brought it up, and then we'll let Joe go in, and then I'll attempt to talk about how I would turn this into a VR game.
Yeah, of course. So kind of like, in my opinion, the biggest obstacle in converting this game, because you would think like, oh, it's first person, so it should make for kind of like a perfect game to translate in VR.
And the short answer to that is no. No, it's not.
It is incredibly difficult, because one of the big differences between a first-person game and a VR game is that when you're playing a first-person game, you're looking at a computer monitor. There's a certain bit of distance, and so that allows your brain to believe like I'm playing a video game. I'm not like really experiencing this. But when you put on a headset, your brain really believes like, oh, I am embodying the Ghostrunner. I am playing as this character. And so when you're doing all these fast movements, moving the camera
But your
around,
body isn't feeling them. There's a thing in your inner ear that kind of simulates, it believes you've been poisoned, so it makes you feel sick. It wants to make you throw up so you can throw up the poison. That's why you get nauseous when you play VR games. And we, as developers, we call this simulator sickness. That's the official term. That's what's written in all the books. And there's a lot of documentation on this particular topic, is how do I design my games around, simulator sickness? And, how can I make sure that my game doesn't do this? And with this game specifically, there are a lot of things that would worry me if I was making a VR experience with this same subject matter, movement, and combat.
Yeah, I don't know how comfortable I would be trying to translate this into VR. I just feel like, no.
In my opinion, if you were to make this in VR, you would basically, instead of like porting Ghostrunner, I would just make a completely different.
No, if you were to, let's be clear here. You would never be able to port this game. Any VR game that is ported is usually awful, and that might just be, it might just be because Bethesda does it terribly and gives it a bad rap. But when it comes to making a VR title, the worst thing you can do is go, all right, I'm going to make all of the functionality for this first-person game, and then I'm going to transfer it into VR. I'm going to just shove my headset into this. It's essentially like you're taking a PS3 game with a disc, right? And you're just jamming your Oculus Quest 2 headset directly inside of it, and then trying to duct tape it shut, and then ship it. That's what it feels like to play a port, and that's why most people who go, I've tried VR and I don't like it, they've played games that were just terrible ports of, desktop and PC games and, console games, right? And that's not the desired experience we'd want to give users. So when you're building a VR experience, especially if you are transferring a previously existing experience over, you need to understand that in your process, you're going to be recreating every single action, mechanic, and movement style in this game through and rebuilding it from the ground up in VR.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, there are really no actions in my brain right now in this game that I'm seeing that I could think about building up in VR. And I don't know, Joe, if you have a contradiction to that, but I feel like this would not be an easy game to transition to VR at all.
The thing about it is,
actually be an incredibly difficult game.
It might not even be worth it,
It's not really worth it.
Because like, you'd basically have to make like an entirely different game mechanically, and given that the mechanics are like the reason you would play the game, I just don't know if it would be worth it, because the only thing you can really keep intact is, I'd say, the sword combat. That's kind of like the one thing you could probably translate into VR relatively easily. But beyond that, like all these other mechanics, like slowing down time and all that, I mean, you couldn't have the UI kind of in the bottom left corner, and that's like a major thing that the player would need to keep be updated on. It's kind of like, okay, well, my thing's on like on a cooldown. When am I allowed to use my technique again? And that's not so UI. We've already discussed earlier, like having UI in the experience be like on the player, be like a static thing on their headset, just is not a comfortable thing either for the frame rate or the players themselves.
This game would also need to be severely down-res if it were going to run on any of the mobile headsets. And at this point, if you're developing a VR experience, this is my opinion, and other developers would disagree with me. Possibly some people in this room. If you're going to develop a VR game at this point, it's got to run on the Quest 2. At least the Quest 2. That's because that is what most users who are using VR are using nowadays. Everyone is pretty much on a Quest 2, and I still use my Rift S, but that's because I'm a developer, I'm lazy, and a lot of the time I don't want to try and port a game using a USB 3.0 cable to play some of those old PC VR titles, which are still good games, mind you. They're just, a little bit more of a pain in the ass to get running on your computer and then making sure your headset's connected. And that's definitely something that's come apparent, is I'm way more likely to play a VR game on my Quest than I am on my PC. Unless the PC VR game is really good, like Boneworks or... what's another one? I guess Half-Life Alyx or Wraith. But Half-Life Alyx can still be played on the Quest 2, you just gotta plug it into your computer. But I would say it's an absolute must at this point that games are able to run on the Quest 2 if they are a VR title, and taking this environment and porting it to the Quest 2, which you probably have a max of around 20 gigs of packaging data, as well as like with your frame rate and your desired FPS, which would be 72 frames per second. And I think the desired frames per second in this game is around 60 because it's a fast-paced game. That's 12 more frames that you need per second. And it would be incredibly difficult to take this environment that we're in right now, in the current resolution that it's in, and put it on a Quest, especially because there is dynamic lighting in these scenes, and you can tell.
Yeah, and dynamic lighting is like, that's you have to really optimize.
Our horror stories.
And the developers inside of us right now are getting way too technical for the average person watching this channel, this stream.
Oh,
so
that's
I would
fair. That's fair.
I would like to apologize that, and let's move away from that because, I'm thinking, would my mom understand this? Not at all, and I'm pretty sure my mom is watching, so I don't want to, I don't want to get into the. What would you guys like to explain?
Discuss a bit? Kind of try to, because I feel like it might be good to.
I feel like explaining dynamic versus static license would need its own stream, and I don't want to go through that right now as I'm attempting to navigate my way through a bunch of enemies, especially because yeah, especially because I'm dying a lot right now.
Save the discussion. Basically, optimization would be like the game couldn't look like this if we wanted to put it in VR. Is what we're trying to say.
Unless we had figured out some amazing new rendering feature that made us all $1 million.
Okay, looks like we got. Looks like. Jessica Kuslich, she has said, "Nope, I do not understand," with a smiley face.
I figured, Mom. I thank you very much for being here. It means a lot that you came to show your support. My mom's watching my game design live stream. I hope that the violence of this video game is not too much for you, and I appreciate that you're here. But yes, sorry about getting too technical there, and I understand how that could be really confusing. Eventually, it would be really nice to do a live stream dedicated to lighting within Unreal and Unity. If we could do that, that would take a live stream. I would not want to try and edit a video about that because there is so much information that we would have to cover, and we'd need a lot of notes. And I just don't have all that information in my head. But
yeah,
let's get back to the game that we're playing right now. And what other complications could you foresee attempting to turn this into a VR game? Or what do you think would work really well in VR? Because one thing in particular that I see is the specific actions that the user uses with their left hand when they're using their special abilities, such as the Tempest and the Overlord, where you convince enemies to kill each other, or we're sending a static shock forward with our left hand, like I showed just a little bit ago. I feel like those actions would feel really good in VR if done correctly. We have the animation systems loaded up, so every time the user thrusts their hand forward, if their Tempest is fully loaded, they are able to deflect. Another interaction that would work really well is the ninja, where he launches towards you. So this would be a lot easier in VR, and it would feel really good in VR when you finally nailed it. And I think that sorry, I got distracted by a chat in the thing. Anna is also watching our stream, so Anna, thank you very much for showing up. Hopefully we've been able to teach you something, or at least open up something about this game, because if we taught our teacher, that'd be amazing. But so I feel like the ninja interaction, where we're blocking a projectile attack that shoots straight at us, so we don't have to actually rotate our head too far to the left or right. We're looking directly forward in that interaction. That would feel really good in VR. So if you found a way to kind of make a lot of the other enemies feel like that, it would be a really great interaction to have in a VR game. Now, another issue with if we were to turn this into a VR game is, like, why VR? Why would we want this to be a VR game? Like, could it really benefit from being a VR game, or is it fine being left as is, as a normal standard media game?
I think, I mean, I feel like we already kind of talked about it earlier when we were talking about the issue of just, kind of the motion sickness that this game would very easily cause if you were to just strictly port it.
That's like the technical risk of the game. What I'm saying is, game design-wise and gameplay-wise, would this game be better if it was VR? Would it be more fun to play if we had figured out all of those issues and had it in VR? Would all of that work be worth it?
Honestly, I feel like you'd be jumping through so many more hoops in comparison, just because the one thing that's an emphasis in this game is the form of speed and fluidity, and trying to figure out a locomotion system that can replicate that effectively in VR is just generally difficult, because like the common ones have always been teleportation, a look at, or thumbstick, and even thumbstick on VR is pretty bad for how it is currently, and
Dang,
trying to maintain
tell it like it is.
and
when
maintain.
you say thumbstick, you mean thumbstick locomotion.
Yeah. So specifically, can you just describe thumbstick locomotion for my mom, who doesn't actually know what that is?
Basically, to simplify it, it's like using the actual thumbsticks, the joysticks of the control on the Oculus controller or the VR controller itself to push your character, your pawn, in a direction. And if you wanted to turn, you could have like manipulated one of those specific joysticks so that if you turn it either to the left or the right or up and down, it would change your looking direction, your camera. It would adjust its rotation. However, with a lot of that comes with motion sickness. Those types of games, especially that utilize that form of locomotion or controller layout, are just more likely to give their user motion sickness and not want to further play the game. And so if you were to try and replicate that in Ghostrunner and put that in VR, not only would you be increasing the chances of someone becoming sick and wanting to throw their headset away, it just would diminish the value of speed and essence that this game already is trying to achieve in its regular format.
And what Joe is essentially saying there is, not only could it be damaging to the game itself, it could be damaging to VR as a medium, because a lot of people right now are, criticizing VR as it's a gimmick, or I can't play it made me too motion sick. And that's probably because they had tried one experience that was not designed correctly that made them sick, and so they never wanted to try VR again. And as a VR developer, if you are one, you are held to that standard of essentially you need to really hold yourself accountable with what systems you're designing and the type of movement, because locomotion is the first and foremost way that people navigate in the worlds that you create. If you do not create a system that doesn't make even the most motion sick susceptible person feel like they can play the experience, you have failed. And you can't rely on any sea legs. You can't rely, what we like to call VR sea legs, so someone who's played a lot of VR, so they're a little bit less susceptible to motion sickness, simulator sickness. And with that experience, you know, especially with this one, this would be one of those experiences that someone tries, they put on the headset, they try your experience, and they immediately put it down, and it's going to be really hard to convince them to try VR again because of the negative experience that they had with your one game. And you know, you could say, oh, I'm not like that, I wouldn't be like that, but the majority of people have a low attention span and are extremely stubborn. So if they try your game and they decide they don't like it, you know, you could essentially turn them off to VR forever. And that would be really unfortunate.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And, you know, and talking as someone personally that is a bit more stubborn, especially, I mean, we were talking earlier about Ghostrunner, how just having the jump button be on the right bumper was all it took for me.
I did not expect that to be such a dominating factor of this stream, but I guess that really bothers you guys.
It's you play games a certain way for a long period of time, and then when a game, you know, does something different that you're not expecting and that you're not used to, you know, it really can, you know, make or break the experience for you when it's such an integral part of the gameplay. But, you know, going back to VR more specifically, I mean, yeah, for a lot of people, when you play a VR experience, that could be very well their first and potentially only time in VR, depending on whether they really enjoy what they're experiencing or not. So, you know, you kind of have to develop with the mindset that, like, this will more likely than not be someone's first experience with the medium. And, you know, you have to, you know, develop with the idea, like, I gotta make sure that they, like, is this gonna work in VR, basically? It's something you should always be asking yourself.
Not to rush time at all, guys, but just a reminder.
So I was gonna let him finish his point. So we are out of time for this stream. It's an hour long every Friday. I would say that this stream went really well. So we are going to do it again next week. And Joe, if you would like to announce the title that we are playing next week, so we can start on the ads for that, that would be really great. I know that this is a game that you and I both played through and like a lot, and I'm very excited to allow you to announce it.
Yeah, so for next week, if depending on our schedule, and hopefully we are available, we'll be planning to play Firewatch and do an analysis of that game. Quinn and I personally played those games, as he stated, and it's a very enjoyable, atmospheric experience that, honestly, I'm really looking forward to analyzing and just understanding the simplicity of it. It
is an absolute genre jump from tonight's stream. So it's going to be very different next week if we play that game. And that's something I'm excited for, is to analyze a completely different type of video game. And Joe, just so, you know, anyone who could possibly be watching who has never heard of Firewatch, which, you know, could be everyone that's watching the stream. There's a very little amount of people watching, so we don't actually know who they are or what they're doing. But can you summarize Firewatch before we, you know, end the stream?
Basically, Firewatch has you set as a role of a firewatcher out in a national park, and it's a very story-driven experience that tells it through a lot of narrative details and character development, but also in its environment. In terms of just like the overall gameplay, it's very simple, but what's impactful and leaves a valuable impression on the player is how they provide input with the NPCs as well as the characters in this universe or in this game, and that's the enjoyment you get out of it.
So dialogue choices in the narrative actually have change, like they can potentially kind of change the outcome of the story.
In a way, the story ends in the same way it does no matter what, but the dialogue adds to different conversations that you're seeing, which makes it worth the playthrough. Again, either way, we are out of time. Thank you for announcing that, Joe. I would like to thank everyone for watching the stream. I really appreciate it. And we'll hope to be back at the same time next week, depending on if we have a lot of homework or not. But this was a really enjoyable experience, and it went a lot better than I thought it was going to, because I only said a few times, which is great. So that's a win in my book. And oh crap, I said it again. I've never ended a stream before. With YouTube videos, I usually just thank everyone for watching and call it a day. But you know,
I think you can do it the exact same way. You know, thank everyone.
I am going.
I hope you have a great day.
We're gonna thank everybody for watching. We hope you have a great